Buckle up, America, because we're about to take you on a white-knuckle ride 30,000 feet in the air. JD Vance, the Trump-endorsed senator from Ohio, the vice presidential nominee, just had a midair scare that'll make your palms sweat. Trump forced to make an emergency landing. But did that shake our man? Not a chance. Fresh from his brush with danger, Vance hit the ground running, delivering a blistering takedown of the Biden-Harris regime to the Milwaukee Police Association. Talk about grace under fire. We've got all the details. Now, check this out. While JD Vance was fighting gravity at 30,000 feet, smart Americans are fighting to protect their financial future on solid ground. As our economy teeters on the brink, thanks to the Biden-Harris disaster, savvy patriots are turning to the one thing that the government can't control: gold. Global Gold Investments, America's leading conservative precious metals dealer, is your fortress against this economic turbulence. They're offering a 5-year IRA fee waiver program on qualified rollovers. Don't wait for the economy to nosedive before you act. Call 888-700-4148. That's the number you see on the screen. Mention Next News for VIP treatment. Your financial safety is clear for takeoff. Okay, so an interesting little development. Trump Force 2, the plane carrying JD Vance forced to make an emergency landing after a mid-flight scare. Early reports suggest there was a problem with its main cabin door. Why do Trump's planes have so many problems? Salty Cracker weighing in. Sure seem to be a lot of malfunctions on conservative planes lately. I'm sure it's just a coincidence. JD Vance's Trump Force 2, Boeing 737, made an emergency landing in Milwaukee after a pilot discovered a door seal malfunction, coming just 1 week after President Trump's plane made an emergency landing in Billings due to a hydraulic leak. Say a prayer for their safety. What's going on? We had an assassination attempt on Donald Trump just weeks ago. We're finding out now that the FBI just illegally had a crook's body cremated. And now we have Trump's plane having an emergency landing, and now we have Vance's plane, an emergency landing. What's going on? Is this all sabotage? Is something afoot? I've often said that if they're going to take out Trump, they're going to make it look like an accident. Now, of course, the Crooks situation was overt and right in your face. It would have been broadcast on national television for everyone to see. And then he has an emergency landing. Trump Force 1. Trump Force 2. Man, I'd love to see someone run the numbers on this, but I think the chances of all these things happening, yeah, not likely. What else do we have here? This is, it happened in Milwaukee. There is the Trump Vance plane. Trump Force 2 makes an emergency landing due to a door seal malfunction. There it is, making its landing. Trump Force 2, a Boeing 737 charter aircraft carrying Republican vice presidential nominee JD Vance, made an emergency landing in Milwaukee International Airport. According to airport officials, the plane, operated by Eastern Air, returned to the airport around 1:30 p.m. Due to a possible issue with the door seal, the aircraft landed normally and taxied without incident under its own power. After declaring an emergency, Trump Force 2 returned to Milwaukee. Once the issue was resolved, the plane was cleared for takeoff, resumed its original flight path to Cincinnati. This incident comes just 1 week after former President Trump's plane also made an emergency landing. What do you guys think? So thankfully he's safe, and he was able to go on and get these endorsements, taking actual questions from the press. Now, that speech that we saw Kamala Harris give of her economic plan, no, there were no questions. It was all, I'm talking at you. You're going to have communism and you're going to like it. JD Vance, easily fielding questions just like Donald Trump.
And you were talking about the relationship between crime and immigration, and my question is on that issue.
Please.
In an interview when you were running for Senate in September 2021, you were speaking with Jack Murphy, and you were talking about previous waves of immigration to the United States. You said the following: you had this massive wave of primarily Italian, Irish, and German immigration, and that had its problems and that had its consequences. You pointed to these problems as being higher crime rates, ethnic enclaves, and inter-ethnic conflict. Should the United States have prescribed similar policies to what you're proposing now, including mass deportation, to deal with those issues?
Well, first of all, I also said there were a lot of benefits to that wave of immigration. But
you were talking about the relationship.
I mean, listen to that question. I don't think Kamala could even figure out an answer for that. Let's continue.
Enclaves forming in our country, it can sometimes lead to higher crime rates. What we want is an American immigration policy that promotes assimilation, that no matter where you come from, you can become an American, but only if we have an immigration policy that promotes assimilation instead of doing things like what we've done over the last few years, which is have 25 million illegal aliens just setting up shop here with no control, no enforcement, and no real ability to police what's going on. That is a disaster. And in fact, what we did back in the early 20th century is that we recognized, and I think that we have to do that today, we recognize that at a certain level, America is a welcoming country to immigrants, but can only take so many people. We cannot take the entire world into this country. And I think that we're at a stage right now where we have to say we've got to slow those illegal immigration levels to zero. We do have to deport some people who have come here illegally. And I think that will promote assimilation and a common American culture that's in the best interest of everybody. Look, I'm married to the daughter of South Asian immigrants. One of the reasons why I think that we have such a wonderful and successful marriage is because we both very much feel like America is our home, like our children belong here. What happens when you have massive amounts of illegal immigration, it actually starts to create ethnic conflict. It creates higher crime rates. We've certainly seen that over the last few years, and I would like to stop it, and I know Donald Trump would too.
Amen. Amen. Assimilation. It's always been the way. When my family came here from Italy generations ago, they assimilated. They didn't even teach my father's generation the Italian language because they wanted my father's generation to be American. I didn't really learn any Italian culture other than through Hollywood. How sad is that? But we became American, and that's how it should be. Kamala Harris weaponizing the DOJ, JD Vance.
Their First Amendment. Well, look, I think that Kamala Harris has weaponized the Department of Justice, not just against my running mate, not just against President Trump, but against a whole host of normal Americans for just exercising their First Amendment rights. I mean, not maybe the most significant scandal, but certainly a very large scandal is the Department of Justice went after a pro-life Catholic father of 7 for exercising his right to peacefully protest. The Department of Justice showed up. The Department of Justice leadership had officers show up at this guy's house and treat him like a common thug for exercising his right of First Amendment protest. And I think that every single police officer here would agree with me when they say that we want a strong Department of Justice that focuses on law enforcement. Why don't they focus on shutting down the drug traffickers of the southern border and the sex traffickers and let Americans exercise their First Amendment rights? That's not what the leadership of the Department of Justice should be focused on, but unfortunately, under Kamala Harris, it has. So I think that we are clearly the party and the movement of law enforcement. You talk to the field guys in the FBI, the people who are actually on the ground dealing with the bad guys, and they're as frustrated with their leadership as we are. We just want American leadership to empower law enforcement to enforce the laws. It's going to make us all safer if we do that.
Amen. JD Vance calling out weak on crime Kamala.
That means those people get out of... Let me just say a few words about the policies that have made it harder to be a police officer, and most importantly, harder for it to just be a citizen who wants basic public safety in this country. So Kamala Harris is on a tour where she's trying to redefine her record as a tough-on-crime prosecutor. And yet if you look at Kamala Harris's record as a prosecutor, it is the opposite of tough on crime. For example, Kamala Harris pursued a policy that would recategorize people who had committed sex crimes with minors and people who had raped unconscious victims as nonviolent crimes. And what does that mean? That means those people get out of prison earlier. That means their victims have to suffer the psychological abuse of seeing them walking around our streets sooner. And that means the police officer have a few more sickos that they have to take care of instead of being in prison where those sex offenders belong. If Kamala Harris was so tough on crime, why is she making it easier for sex offenders to get out of prison? I think the media should ask her that question. Of course, Kamala Harris refuses to answer questions, but this is important stuff.
It is important stuff, and of course, Kamala doesn't. She dodges the press. She hasn't had a press conference or an interview, but she's promising she'll have one by the end of the month. The clock's ticking. JD Vance talked to a sheriff an hour from Milwaukee. Listen to this.
He lives an hour away. So I talked to one sheriff who lives about an hour away from downtown Milwaukee. And even though he lives an hour away from downtown Milwaukee, he has Mexican drug cartel members who have been doing business, selling drugs, and harming the citizens of his community. When you hear Republicans say every state is a border state, that is not just a slogan. That is a sad reflection of the reality that we have drug cartels operating about as far north in this country as we possibly could. What a disgrace. You hear people talk about arresting illegal immigrants and how the illegal immigrants completely run away, refuse to obey the commands of law enforcement. Well, why? Why do they completely refuse to obey the commands of law enforcement? Because they got into this country in the first place under the promise that law enforcement wouldn't stop them and wouldn't enforce the law. So the border policies that we have at the southern border, they make our communities less safe, even as far north as Wisconsin. It means Mexican drug cartels operating in our communities. It means people dying of fentanyl. So I talked to one sheriff.
Think about that for a second. Like, they come into this country illegally. That they're already breaking. They are here illegally. That's like the whole foundation of their entrance into the United States. They're breaking the law, crossing our border illegally. Why would they want to follow any other laws? He's making a great point. Okay, he's also ripped into freakish Timothy Walz.
And this is a guy, I think Governor Walz was nominated just a couple of weeks ago. He's received a ridiculous media honeymoon where they've hidden, a lot of press have hidden some of the things that he said and done. And this is a guy who actively encouraged rioters to burn down Minneapolis during the summer of 2020. It's the biggest city in his country. And then, of course, his running mate, Kamala Harris, was offering to bail those rioters out of prison. I think when people know the truth about Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, their anti-crime record, their pro-criminal record, the fact that he let rioters burn down the largest city in Minneapolis, I don't think his approval ratings are going to be that high, and I think that Donald Trump and I are going to win. Bail those rioters out of prison.
Listen to this
down
point.
Minneapolis during the summer of 2020. It's the biggest city in his country, and then, of course, his running mate, Kamala Harris, was offering to bail those things that he said and done. And this is a guy who actively encouraged rioters to burn down Minneapolis during the summer of 2020. It's the biggest city in his country. And then, of course, his running mate, Kamala Harris, was offering to bail those rioters out of prison. I think when people know the truth about Kamala...
When people know the truth about Kamala Harris, that's the problem, is they don't know the truth, and the media is running cover. They're putting out propaganda. Every headline. Propaganda, propaganda, propaganda. And you got the paid-for influencers who are pushing out these fake Kamala Harris trends. You got the whole Act Blue scandal. I mean, he says when the people learn the truth. That's why we have to push this message out to the American people. That's why we do this show every day. So the American people can learn the truth. So while he was there, he received the Milwaukee Police Association endorsement. Good news there.
Area of 44,000 citizens. One squad to patrol the entire area of 44,000 citizens. As squads get pulled to other parts of the city to address high priority calls, which can often be more violent in nature that requires more officers. The Milwaukee Police Association believes that the solution to these challenges can be found right here. That's why the MPA is endorsing the presidential ticket of Donald Trump and JD Vance, because addressing these issues isn't political, it's truly a matter of life and death to Milwaukee. So thank you.
Amen.
One
Amen.
squad to patrol the...
So there you have it. JD Vance, a true American hero, staring down danger at 30,000 feet and then immediately taking the fight to the ground, from emergency landings to landing haymakers on the Biden-Harris agenda. Vance proves that it takes more than a little turbulence to ground the MAGA movement. As he rallied the Milwaukee Police Association, one thing became crystal clear: whether in the air or on the streets, our leaders are under attack. So stay vigilant, America. The real dogfight is only beginning.